We got a little technical difficulties here, but it's about to come up. I don't think Tom is here, and he had the PowerPoint, so we gotta.
Tell us more good news. I've been all kinds
Sure.
of places since yesterday while we get stuff up and running.
Well, Ms. Madam President, if I may, I'd like to take this time to thank you all and Dr. Williams and Dr. Moore for the suicide, bullying, harassment program yesterday. I got to watch it on Facebook, and it was, I tell you, just exciting to see our efforts to curb those particular situations in our schools. And I just wanted to thank hopefully they're watching on my Facebook page, but Angie Taylor, Gloria James, we had Representative Tashina Morris, who also is a member of the Education Committee at the state, which is so important, and I'm glad she was able to attend and give a few remarks. Also, Mr. Alan Baker, Representative, is it Senator Alan Baker, I think, representative, for coming all the way up from Baldwin County to participate, as well as former Representative John Knight, and those who sponsored the bill that's existing today. And last but certainly not least, Senator Burkett and his gracious and generous donation to our school system, and that was a plus. Did not expect that, but I'm glad to know that he is just wanting to contribute to all the wonderful things that we're doing at MPS. And it was exciting to have our local delegation here. And I do know that Kirk Hatcher sent his regards. He wasn't able to attend. So.
Laura, and I have to say, Gloria James is one of my students.
Really?
She works with my interns. She works with my interns at South.
Wonderful. And she attends Resurrection Catholic.
And I don't think she does Facebook.
She does.
Oh, yeah, she just friended me.
Okay, we're ready.
But he's not. He's not.
Well, you know this by heart, Mr. Watts. You want to let them catch up with you?
Let me have one.
He act like he can't hear when it's not what he wants.
Let me have one of those. Let me have one of those budgets. Let me have the new one. Yes, did you make a change to it?
Because most of these folks were here.
Yep.
Brenda. Everybody sound like babies. It is. I like that commercial.
So you might need to start with your intro, Mr. Watts, about why we're doing this and all that, and then maybe we can. Do you need a book?
No, not really. For the most part, the law requires that we present two budget hearings before the public. And of course, as stated yesterday, these hearings are for the benefit of the public, so we do encourage public input. So if anyone have any questions or suggestions or comments as it relates to the budget, on the very last page of that budget sheet, there should be something called a suggestion sheet. And so any individual can feel free to write down the comments or suggestions. And we also would have a question and answer period at the end of this presentation. And so we also encourage you to, just raise your hand and we'll acknowledge you and you sort of ask a question. Now, the law requires that we present certain financial data related to the budget. It requires that we present our projected revenue and how we expect to expend those revenues. And of course, by the law, say that we have to project those revenues and expenditures and how we project to expend them, there are also things that we have to keep to be mindful of. And also encourage public input and so forth. But we also have to be mindful of budget constraints. We have to be mindful of guidelines set forth by the state of Alabama. Guidelines set forth by the state federal government. Guidelines set forth by the state.
You might have to push it.
Point this way. Point this way.
Sir?
Point this way.
Sure, okay. Gonna drop for me this? Okay.
Next slide.
Well, yes, let's go on to the next slide, please. But those are the various agencies in which we must be in compliance with. Also, in putting together this budget, there are also certain fund matches that we have to provide in order to participate in state and federal funding. For example, the law requires that we put up out of our own local tax dollars about $28 million to participate in what is called the State's Foundation Program. Now, the State Foundation Program is the largest funding source of Montgomery Public Schools. We'll receive about $151 million from the State's Foundation Program. But the state also required that if we're going to receive those monies, that we'll have to put up out of our own local tax revenues about $27.8 million, so almost $29 million. And basically what the state is saying is that, okay, Montgomery Public Schools, yes, we know that education is indeed a responsibility of the state of Alabama, but it also is a responsibility of your local government and of the local residents. Therefore, we're going to require you to have ad valorem taxes or sales tax or some other tax base to be able to fund education. And that's why we kind of harp on the need for more local funds, because we're required to put up this local match in order to participate in the state's foundation program. But we see that's about $28 million in which we have to put up in order to participate in that program. We'll also receive about $7.5 million in what is called state capital purchase dollars. In order to receive that $7.5 million, we have to put up about $1.7 million out of our local tax dollars to participate in the state capital purchase program. So we see that's almost $30 million that our local district will have to put up to participate in the state funding sources.
Mr. Watts, if I may ask a quick question before you change that slide. So how much do we get in our local taxes,
Our local taxes will total about $56 million.
so a little bit over half of that goes towards the matches.
That is correct.
Taken out of
That
that.
is correct,
Okay.
yes. And I'm going to talk about that on another slide in just a second, because it speaks to the amount of discretionary monies that the district actually have to address other instructional and capital needs.
Okay.
So you're absolutely right, and that's a great point, Ms. Smith.
Thank you.
What are some of the financial challenges for Montgomery Public Schools? You see, first, Montgomery County provides the minimum allowable rate of ad valorem taxes for education. And this is something that we're going to harp on a little bit more in just a minute. District enrollment has been declining since 2015, so it's very, very important that we stabilize our student population. That is something that our superintendent has been working on, and we do believe that we'll continue to see some improvements in that particular area. Current funding is not adequate to meet the demands. Instructional program. You know, I was talking with the chief academic officer about some of our instructional programming. And a couple of things that he stated is that he would love to see us have the arts in every one of our elementary schools. He would love to see us have more foreign language courses in all of our high schools, and more foreign language courses even at the middle school level, and some other academic programming at our middle schools. We talk about theme schools, we talk about career academies, all of these things that can help our students. So we certainly do not have the funding to meet many of those needs. Building renovations. And of course, we've been talking about building renovation now for years. The last number I've heard as it relates to our building renovation is that we're over $200 million short in meeting the needs of our school district. So we're talking about not only just building new schools, we're talking about basically repairing all of our schools. And I'm sure most of you all know that our schools are 40, 50, 60 years old. And some of our schools have gone a long time without major repairs. So where do we get the monies from to repair those schools? What about security upgrades? We all want our students safe and secure. In fact, I think that's a priority. But we have to have the funds in place to provide those security measures. Alternative school and other alternative at-risk programs. We have several needs that we must meet for our students. And there again, we talk about the need for ad valorem tax increase. There we just see a decline of our student population over the last several years. And again, that's something we're working on. We believe as we continue to do some of the things we're doing, we'll stabilize our student population. Of course, the state of Alabama at one point was losing students. So it's not just a problem here in Montgomery. Again, you see the student population, what we'll be funded on for fiscal year 2020, which is about 29,000 students. All school districts operate on basically 5 financial funds. First, there's the general fund that speaks to the general operations of the school district. And our general fund pretty much accounts for all of our state revenues and our local revenues, which basically are our state dollars, mainly the state foundation program, the one that we received at $151 million, and our local tax dollars. Also, special revenue funds are pretty much our federal dollars. We receive funds called Title I, Title II, also food service child nutrition funds. Local school funds are also part of special revenue, well actually local school public funds. And those are dollars that are generated at the local schools for public use, such as the silver concessions would be public funds. Admissions to a football or basketball game would be deemed public funds. Capital projects funds, something I just spoke about the construction, the renovation of our schools and our buildings. Debt service fund, we still have about close to between $4 to $5 million of debt that we pay each year. And our debt service fund is used to pay for that. Fiduciary funds, non-public local school activities monies. These are also monies that are retained at the local school or monies that are raised at the local school. But these monies are basically specifically for a particular club or a particular class. Unlike local school public funds up there in special revenue, which those dollars could be used and retained at the school level for the entire school. Non-public funds would be mainly for, let's just say you have a science club. So those monies are generated just for the science club. They may have a science fee or have a SGA fee. So those monies are strictly for a particular group at that particular school. And it's raised and generated at that school. There we see our entire fiscal year operating budget for FY 2020, total of about $293 million. We see our state sources make up $168 million. We'll focus on that in just a second. And $151 million of that will be our state foundation program dollars. We also see about $300,000 of federal dollars. These are those monies that we receive from the federal government to help support our ROTC program. And again, we still have $56 million in local funds, which is what Ms. Smith was just asking about. Most of those are our local tax dollars. Other fund sources, right around $3 million. There's a small fee that our general fund access to our federal programs called indirect costs. And that's just a small administrative fee that general fund access to our federal program fund because we are operating those particular funds. We see special revenue, again, special revenue are mostly federal dollars, Title I, Title II, child nutrition, food service, debt service, the payment of long-term debt, capital projects, renovations of our schools and buildings, expendable trust fund, non-public local school dollars. Again, it's a total of $293 million. We would just like to point out that our debt service fund, those monies are usually transferred from our capital project fund to pay long-term debt. There again, we're going to focus first on our general fund, $228 million of total revenues, then we'll talk about the expenditures. Again, the general fund is $28 million. Total revenues are projected for FY 2020, $293.5 million. And then we have a breakdown of our total general fund revenues. We see $168,895 again that we will receive from the state of Alabama, mainly from the state's foundation program. And I'll talk about how those dollars are acquired in just a second. Of course, the federal dollars, the little ROTC dollars, is mainly that being our local tax revenues or local dollars, and mainly indirect costs for the other fund sources. Let's look at this pie chart. I'd like everybody to remember this pie chart and remember the percentages here. We see that our state revenues make up about 74% of our total revenues. Again, state revenues make up about 74% of our total revenues. Our local revenues make up about 25% of our total revenues. So let's just keep that in mind. Our state revenues, 74% or 73.8% to be specific, more specific. Local revenues, 24.7% of our total general fund revenues. Let's look at some other school districts. We see that Montgomery Public Schools, again, our state revenues about 73.8%, local revenues about 24.7%. Let's look at Birmingham. And what we want to do, we want to look at some districts that have some similar demographics as Montgomery. So districts with similar demographics as Montgomery. Birmingham, their state sources make up 56% of their total revenue. Let's look at their local sources, their local revenue. 42% of their total general fund revenue in Birmingham are local sources. Let's look at Huntsville City, a school district that Dr. Moore served as superintendent. Huntsville City, state 53%, local sources 46%. Now I'm not going to ignore Baldwin County for a second because I know they get a lot of tourism money and so forth. But I want to draw a contrast here with Montgomery and Birmingham and Huntsville. Well, what does that say when we say Alabama in Montgomery Public Schools, 73.8% is state funds, Birmingham 56% is state funds, and Huntsville 53% is state funds? Well, it tells us that we're too dependent on state funds here in Montgomery. We are way too dependent on state funds. That means that anytime you have a problem, or we have a problem with state funding in Alabama, such as proration, or any other hiccup that could be caused in state funding, that we're going to suffer a lot more than any of these other districts. We're going to suffer a lot more than any of these other districts, because these other districts have more local support to be able to sustain any type of hiccup that is caused at the state level. So we're only receiving 24% from local sources, while these districts are receiving 42%. And Pam, I want to ask Pam, how much local revenues does Birmingham get a year? Birmingham gets $99 million in local revenues a year. $99 million of local revenues a year. We get 56 million. Now, one may say, well, Birmingham is large and so forth. How many students does Birmingham have?
22,000.
Birmingham is being funded on 23,000 students. We have 28 or 29,000 students. So we have 6,000 or 7,000 more students than Birmingham has. But Birmingham is coming up with $99 million in local revenues compared to our 56 million. So that's where that contrast is. You have districts that have fewer students than Montgomery, or have much more local revenues than Montgomery, so they can afford to have all of these things I was just talking about. Those various exploratory courses, those various foreign language courses, doing renovations on their schools. So that's why I think it's incumbent upon us as Montgomery Public Schools, the city of Montgomery, and Montgomery County to do something about that. We really, really, really need an ad valorem tax increase. Before I move on to the next slide, let's talk about Huntsville City for a second. How many students does Huntsville City have? So Huntsville City have about 23,000 students. Again, how much local revenue? $103 million. So we're talking about 23,000 students at Huntsville City, $103 million. Again, we have almost 29,000 students, 6,000 students more than Huntsville City. They're receiving $103 million in local revenues. Montgomery, $56 million in local revenues. So we do see that contrast there, right? We do see the need then why we need additional local resources to do many of these things that I was just speaking of. The state funding process, basically, when we talk about the state money, the state fund all school districts pretty much equally. It's based on student population. And it doesn't matter whether it's a school district that we would, I guess, deem well off, or a school district that's poor in the black belt areas. Doesn't matter, state fund. All of those school districts are the same. So out of the 29,000 students that we have, that makes up about 4% of the total student population in the state of Alabama. Therefore, we receive about 4% of the funding, which is $151 million that we received from the state's foundation program. But let's look at that very last bullet, which is so important. Districts that provide more local support per pupil have the following advantages. Increased seasonal cash flows. That means those districts would not have to go out and do a line of credit like we had to do a couple of years ago just to make payroll. Because they have the cash flow to be able to do those things. Those districts have the ability to employ more locally funded teacher units, resulting in lower student-teacher ratio. And that's what we all want. We all want a lower student-teacher ratio for our students. We all want to be able to offer those particular course offerings that I just spoke of for our students. We want to be able to renovate our schools and do some of the things that need to be done for our students. So also it provides us enhanced learning opportunities. Now, I earlier stated that our ADM, our funding from the state, is basically derived from student population. And that's called ADM, which is Students Average Daily Membership. And again, as you see, we have about 28,000, almost 29,000 students for 2020 is what we were funded on, which is a loss of about 577 students from the prior year. Based on that 28,000 ADM of 28,000 students, we'll earn from the state funds for 1,682 teachers, funding for 50 principals, funding for 29.5 APs, assistant principals, counselors, and librarians. And we see what we had last year, so we see we're losing almost 40 units. But anytime you lose students, you also lose dollars. Because based on that ADM, we earn what are called teacher units. Basically what the state does, it looks at all of our students, every one of our students in grades K through 12, and they break it down by grade levels. For example, in grades K through 3, they would say every X number of students, you will earn 1 teacher unit. In grades 4 through 6, every X number of students, you will earn 1 teacher unit. Grades 7 through 8, every X number of students, you earn 1 teacher unit. And grades 9 through 12, every X number of students, you earn 1 teacher unit. And I use the same example that I used before. So let's say that in grades K through a particular school had 200 kids, 200 students that attended school in grades K through 3. So when you look at all of the students in that school, they may have 200 students in grades K through 3. They may have 150 students in grades 3 through 6 at an elementary school. But they just focus on grades K through 3 right now. And let's just say that in grades K through 3, that school had 200 students. And let's say the state's ratio is, this is for example, the state's ratio is out of every 20 students, you earn 1 teacher unit. So if you have 200 students in grades K through 3, every 20 students you earn 1 teacher unit, then how many teacher units would we earn for grades K through 3? Anybody? 10. That's right. You earn 10 teacher units. But divide 20 students, 20 students into 200 students, I get 10. And so the state is going to fund us on 10 teacher units for grades K through 3. That's what they'll fund us for. 10 teachers, the salaries and benefits for 10 teacher units in grades K through 3. They do that with all of those devices that I just spoke about, grades K through 3, kindergarten through 3rd, grades 4 through 6, grades 7 through 8, and grades 9 through 12. And of course, those divisors are different for each group of grade level. Some are higher, some are a little bit lower. And then the state that looks at the total number of teacher units a school earns. Look at the degrees earned by those teachers and the years of experience of those teachers, plotted on the state salary matrix, and that determines the amount of foundation dollars that we get, the $151 million. So that's how that's determined. Now, the state may say, okay, Montgomery, you earn 1,682 teacher units. If you want to employ 2,100 teacher units, fine with us. You need to have the local monies to be able to pay for it. You want to be able to offer those foreign language courses that I'm speaking of, you must have the local funds to pay for it. You need to really do some extra renovation other than the money we're going to give you. You need to have the local monies to pay for it. So that's how those units are earned. But in total, we will be funded on a total units of 1,874.63 units based on our student enrollment. And of course, we see that change there from the prior year. Now, I spoke earlier about fund match, and that we are required, in order to participate in the state's foundation program, we're required to put up some monies to participate in that, to even get that $151 million. And I think I stated that we'll have to put up about $27.8 million to participate in the state's foundation program. Well, We put up that $28 million, and that's how that total foundation program is to 179. And then the state said, okay, out of that 179, you must expend at least $99.9 million on teacher salaries. You must expend at least $39 million on the benefits on those salaries. And when we talk about benefits, every single employee in our district, we must pay at least $9,600 just for health insurance. $9,600 just for health insurance. And it doesn't matter who the employee is, the salary of that employee. Every employee, we pay $9,600 annually for health insurance. We also must pay, I think the retirement rate is about 12.41%? About 12.41% for retirement on every one of those employees. We also must pay Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment on behalf of all of those employees. So we see that, that there are a lot of mandates, a lot of requirements that we're not funded for. So we're required then to come up with any shortfalls from our local revenues to help supplement that. Now let's talk about the total amount of money we will actually receive from the state. Now, I think I said $151 million from the state foundation program. And I think it was $27,870 for the local match. So that's how the slide before, that's how we came up with the 179. But we'll actually receive, the state will actually remit to us $151 million from the state foundation program as it relates to the number of students the number of our student population. We'll also receive from the state about almost $1 million for our student nursing program. Now the goal there is for the state to fund a nurse in every school. But the state, it has limitations also as it relates to its funds. So we have to share nurses with various schools. But we can't afford to have a nurse in every school. Now those districts that I'm talking about, Montgomery and Hostel and so forth, guess what they have? They have at least one nurse in all of their schools. And again, we're having to share nurses for several of our schools. Also, transportation, we're a technology coordinator. All school districts are required to have a technology person, and they pay $61,800 towards the salary of that technology coordinator. The state also will provide us for transportation, and that's for our buses. We're required to transport students to and from school. That's it, transport to and from school. Now, if we want to have field trips or have our athletics go to athletic events and so forth, if there are parents out here who have students, guess who has to pay for that? Usually it's the parents. They usually have to pay for that. Now some districts, because they do have a good tax base, sometimes they help fund a lot of that. But of course, that's something that we can afford at this particular time. So the amount of transportation allocation is just to transport our students to and from school, which we'll receive about $9.2 million. A little bit of increase from last year, about $1.1 million, but of course a lot of that is because of the 4% raise. I'm sure many of you heard that the state mandated a 4% raise for all educational employees for fiscal year 2020. Now any teacher units or any units over what the state allocates to us, the district has to pay the salaries of those employees and to pay for that raise. Fleet renewal, these are monies that the state allocates for the purchase of school buses or to pay long-term debt on the purchase of school buses, in which we'll receive about $1.7 million for that. We currently, I think we purchased, how many buses did we purchase in 2018, Chad? Okay, we purchased about 200 buses in 2018. We have those buses financed. So we'll use a lot of this fleet renewal fund monies to pay the debt on those buses.
But Mr. Watts, how much does a school bus cost?
Anywhere between $75,000 to $85,000. And that's without air conditioning.
No.
And so in this standard in the state of Alabama that most school districts does not have air conditioners on their buses. Most school districts do not purchase buses with air conditioners on them, except special ed, is my understanding. I think special ed.
Special ed has.
All of those have to have air conditioning.
You have to.
I think it's an additional $14,000 or $15,000, if I'm not mistaken, if you're gonna get a bus with air conditioning. So if we get some local funding, that may be something we can talk about at some point, so.
I have a question.
Sure.
And you may not, I wanna know who, okay? Teachers, cause my numbers are going through my head. Cause I remember when y'all gave us that, the projection sheet, you were projecting teachers at 70,000. And then I was like, well, teachers don't really make that, and then y'all said,
But you got
well, with the
insurance,
benefits. And your
benefits.
insurance, you just gave the 9,600. Okay, so, regardless of what they make, you say, most new teachers start out about 39, you move up to you're probably 50-ish in your master's, and I know mid-60s on up, okay, with a doctorate, okay? Who sets the difference from a teacher salary, I mean, you tell me the state, and then we go up to these leadership roles that are all making, 85 to 100, even principals making 100. Who sets that salary?
Well, it's up to each individual district to set the salaries of those other positions besides teachers. Now, the state have a state salary matrix.
Who in
for
the
teachers.
district sets that? Who goes that we're gonna give these people 100,000?
Well, the district and the board, the administration and the board sets those salaries.
This board didn't set those, I haven't been on a board that set those salaries.
But
Well,
Lisa, when the salaries are set, they look at the years of experience, the degrees they have, and one teacher across town might be making, one principal may be making one salary and another, but you've gotta add in the years of experience, the benefits that they get and all of that, and their degrees. So sometimes you have some people in the system that have been here a long time.
And Mary, I see that, okay, but being a teacher, that you have to understand, I'm 60 years old. When I started teaching in the private sector, okay? I was making $8,500. Now, you move that $8,500 at St. James, okay, that's St. James. Now at St. James, the most I'd make on a doctorate is 35. That's the private sector, okay? Here, even as a principal, I might make 45. I don't understand why we publicly pay so high.
May I help you a little bit before? Okay, so to see if I can answer that quickly. First of all, there's a state salary matrix that says based on your number of years experience, your degree, etc., your certification, the matrix sets a minimum amount that you can pay.
That's right.
So we can't go below that. So if their minimum is 40,
Who sets that matrix, is what I'm saying.
it's set by the state. They have a state, what they call a state salary.
And
So
see,
we
that's
can't,
what I'm at Success Unlimited right now, okay? I am a doctor, I make $13,500.
okay, I hear you, but we can't go below that. Now, let me extend that a little bit to principals. Principals are for the most part, on contracts. But even with that, on the state salary matrix, these people are 12-month people. We cannot pay them less than what they would make as a 12-month teacher at a AA certificate. And so I'm assuming that whenever the board approved a salary schedule, whenever it was approved, and until we get something new, it doesn't matter if it was approved before your time. It hasn't been anything new presented to the board for approval since then. So that's how we're operating, and so HR just looks at that and plots you in where you fit.
I can understand 60, 70. It's the $100,000 salaries that blow, and then so many of them. It's when you go back, and I'm going to bring up Ed Richardson. When you bring up Ed Richardson, who said we had 44 right here at central office, and we're pretty darn still close to that. I mean, you have to understand what the public is seeing. That public sees that. We can sit here with 40 people in the room, and y'all can keep this the same thing that you said Tuesday and the same thing that you said today, But the public out there thinks like this chick right here. They do, and that's who, when you give us these the little sheet that you gave with the little, you know, the bottle here and said $100,000 will cost you this, whatever. You look at the people that do have money, which is what you're wanting, and you're taking somebody that has, you know, that lives in a $500,000 house, and you're asking them to give $600, and it's the whole thing looks kind of shady.
I'm really sorry that you feel that way, but and of course I'm going to continue on this on this plot about we need more money for education here in Montgomery. 10 meals is the minimum amount that even the state requires every school district to have. 10 meals is the minimum amount. And guess where we are? We're at the minimum amount.
Right.
And I think it's a shame that we here in the
Capital city.
Montgomery, in the capital city, in the capital city are only paying the minimum amount
And we're
required
only,
by the state.
Mr.
And all of these other school districts, that have comparative demographics to Montgomery, you got some school districts are paying 20, 30, 40, 60 meals, Dr. Keith.
Well, and
And we're at 10 meals.
I dare
That's the
say,
problem with that.
I dare say that we have enough problems getting and retaining teachers because we are competing with other places in the state which have higher ones than we do.
I'm not gonna get in that can of worms.
Well,
We lost teachers for more reasons than.
Yeah, well, the
what y'all
systems,
are admitting up here.
the systems that have their own salary schedule where they can even pay teachers more,
And they
actually retain their teachers at a higher rate.
Because they got tired of what was
Yeah.
going on with y'all.
But if we were paying them at a higher rate, they'd stay. Now, let me say this last thing. If you took 10 and,
Our rate would be nepotism
So-
for families still.
okay, let me just say this without this getting into a debate. If we took $10,000 or $20,000 from whomever and put it all together in a pot, it still would not pay the $15 million that we need to put the air conditioning in at Lanier. It wouldn't add up to anything close to that. So that's a little bit of a kind of nickel and diming. We're talking about big bucks to do the kind of work that we need to do at our schools. $15 million for one school to get air conditioning. That's what we're talking about. You could take how much ever money you wanted to take from people in the central office, you would not get close to $15 million. And we're talking about big bucks. We're not talking about little pot here, a little pot there. We're talking about the big overall picture.
And
I
but the
also
big
wanna
overall
say-
picture too, Dr. Ward, year after year after year, if you're still paying that same amount of money, hundreds of that, $100,000 to a principal, to a principal, well, we don't have the principal leads anymore, to an executive director, all these things that, these duplicated jobs that we still have, those add up year after year.
All I would say
They just
to
do.
that, Dr. Keith, that even when you look at the same school districts I'm talking about, the Birminghams and these more urban school districts, is way more. If you were to look at their salary schedules, it's way more than what Montgomery pays. And I'll get them for you if you'd like me to.
No, I mean, you know, I'm the Lone Ranger up here because, you know, y'all don't look at it. I've been in this system for well over 30 years, and I've watched it. I thought just like other people out there, hey, we live in a great city, and we do. We still do. But it took me fighting from 2011 to 12 to see some of the things that goes on behind closed doors and still going on.
Mr. Watts,
And
may,
you wouldn't, you'd probably lose your job.
Mr. Watts, as a board, Madam President, as a board meeting, and Lisa, you make some good points, because I've seen different things in different systems, so I do understand what you're talking about. I'll use the city, since my husband works there. There is a metric with that they use. There's a minimum, and I think Dr. Moore spoke on that with the State Department. There's a minimum and there's a maximum, and apparently that's what they have to go by. And then, like Mary pointed out, the years of experiences also equate in there. The other thing that you brought up is, you know, we're asking people with money to pay. We're asking everybody to give. We're not just looking to one group. We're asking everybody
Well, I know,
to
and
make
I was just
education
using the
important.
doublement, what we have on here, what, if you look at that pay structure, you have the doublement people, somebody with $100,000 house is gonna pay 120.
But that's
versus
what
something
But if that's what their
something-
houses
that's
were,
something
That's what their
if that's what their houses were,
That's Madison City.
how that
Madison
works.
City.
Oh, okay.
That's not Montgomery. They just passed a 12 mil increase for their school system.
And when we're looking at big,
12 mil increase for their
But the
they're
reason
already
you're
on the
using
10
this
mil.
is to
No, I
show
just wanted you to see it. No, I just wanted to see
No,
it.
no, it's not. No, it's not.
It's just to show
and if we're
what they,
looking,
how they.
if we're looking big picture too, I mean, it's certainly a personal goal of mine to see the arts in every school, and that won't happen on the current.
And we would have to earmark it that. The public would want to know that that money was going to the arts, was going to.
They're going to earmark it. When you do a plan like this, I learned from Butler County, it's all earmarked. You,
in Huntsville and Birmingham, we got the same demographics. So why is it that you can't say you're dealing with a different group of people? The demographics are the same. So what's the mentality of people in Huntsville and Birmingham? If the demographics are the same, I'm keeping that in mind, but we're not talking about different demographics. So what is the driving force that's keeping Montgomery, and we're the capital city, and the demographics? I'm not understanding.
Right. And
What's the driving force that's keeping us from doing what people with the same demographics are doing? What is it about Montgomery that we're not able to move forward?
that's an excellent question. And that's why we're here, and that's why we're putting it out there. That's why we're making these comparisons, and so the public can be aware of where we stand, and the board can go out and talk with their constituents, and we put that out there, because it's gonna take a vote of the people to be able to get that, to be able to, for us to be funded the same as those other school districts. And I don't know whether it's been out there or not, but that's why we're harping on it right now. We're gonna continue to keep it out there.
But do you know what is the?
They value education.
They value, that's it, value in
But the
education.
demographics are the same. You said the same. You're doing the
They
same.
have made it a priority to educate the children.
Right.
It's a mindset. It is a mindset, we have to change it.
That's right.
And to be honest, public perception has a lot to do with what's going on. If we continue to put the ugly in front of our people, that's all we're going to see. We have a lot of good things going on. We need to make certain it's okay to let them know the ugly. We need to be truthful when we're going to be transparent. We don't need to just be transparent about what's bad about what's going on in our family and our community. We need to make certain that we talk about the entire picture. And as my colleague was talking, I wrote myself a note. In this town, we are begging for the top succeeding opportunities for our children, but we want to finance that off of a pauper's salary. We cannot give the kids the best when we are giving them the least that we have to offer.
Excuse me, I'm just gonna put it out there, because she said demographics, and it just speaks to a real point that nobody talks about, the elephant in the room. Montgomery is 55% African American. Montgomery Public Schools are 80% and higher African American population. Lee High School is the most diverse high school in the district. It's 80% African American. Jefferson Davis High School, named after Jefferson Davis, is 92% African American. So while 55% of your population is sending nearly 100% of its students to your public schools, 40% of your population is not sending their children to the public school system. And so you have two things happening. If people are not, seeing a return on the investment, then they don't want to invest. But if my child is not a part of the school system in the first place, that's the reason why you have people going out to Pike Road and wherever else and not wanting to pay property taxes, because their kids are not even attending the school. So until you get real about that reality and why it is that 40% of your population does not send their children to public schools, and it can't just be because older schools are bad. That's been happening since 1969. So if we're not going to get real about that and say it's time to have a school system that's genuinely integrated, because I wouldn't pay my money for a district my kids weren't a part of either. So we need to get real about that. We need to talk about return on investment. We got teachers working hard. I don't think this woman ever sleeps, the superintendent. I don't believe she sleeps, because she can't. with all the things that she's working on. Our administrators are not sipping coffee. You're talking about they make $100,000 a year. They are working in executive level positions. They hold doctorate degrees. They are managing multiple $100,000, $1 million budgets. They are dealing with school populations that are the size of a small town. So they're not simply doing small work. When you're comparing a private school with an enrollment of 300, 400, 500, 600 kids to a high school that has an enrollment of 1,600 students who have severe needs, who are coming out of high poverty situations, who have housing instability. There are 85,000 houses in Montgomery, 2,000 of them are blighted properties. 12% of the properties in this county are owned by people who live outside of this state, so they're not investing in those properties, which is depressing the property value, which is depressing the taxes you can collect. So if we're gonna have this conversation, let's have a real conversation about the need to invest. If people wanna say, why invest in the school system? Everybody that works in this county was educated somewhere. The majority of people in this country are educated in a public school system. So if you want doctors, nurses, you can't hire nurses if there are no nurses. They have to go to K through 12 before they get there. So if we really want to talk about why should you spend more money, why do you need to raise taxes, why do you need to get out and talk to your constituents, keep it real. This city will die without people who can work in this city, and most of the people in this city come out of a public school system.
Fantastic comments. We say thank you.
We want you on our side.
We say thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Watts, those are fantastic comments. Your statistics were outstanding. Mr. Watts, fantastic. Thank you for your contribution, folks. Please hold your public comments to the end and finish your required by law.
And I just want to say after this, we can talk too, because I would like to keep it real. We've got accountability students that have left our system. You know, you can add homeschooling. We lost 1,179 for a reason, ma'am. And most of them were black.
Let's hold the comments to the end. Thank you for your statistics. Thank you.
And then we see our local match that's required to participate in the state foundation program and the state capital purchase program. Now, and we have a breakdown of our other funds in the general fund outside of our state funds. Of course, we see all those ROTC dollars that help to pay the salaries of some of it's a small supplement to pay the salaries of the ROTC instructors. And then we see the $56 million in local revenues, breakdown of those particular dollars. And other revenue sources, as I stated earlier, the majority of that is indirect costs, which is that small administrative fee that our general fund access to our federal programs to administer those particular programs. Again, this is just another example when we talk about those comparisons, our state fund local match. You know, I earlier stated that the local fund match for Montgomery Public Schools for the foundation program is $27,870,000. But we also know we received local revenues of about $56,558,000. Now we're required, just to participate in the state's foundation program, we're required to put up this $27 million to participate. That leaves us only $28 million in discretionary funds to be able to take care of all of those other needs that I was speaking of. And we also see what it is in Birmingham. Their total local revenue is $99 million. We did do some research to find out what their local match was. Their local match is $25 million. But let's look at the amount of discretionary funds that they have to offer those other courses and to do things for schools and that kind of stuff. Almost $74 million that they have to do other discretionary things. Same thing with Huntsville City. Total revenues $103 million. Their local match is $27 million, which is very similar to Montgomery, but they have over $76 million for other discretionary needs, again, compared to our $28 million. So we're talking about even the lowest one, almost $50 million more in discretionary dollars per year to take care of those needs. All school districts operate basically, this is talking about expenditures, now operate basically on 8 expenditure groups. First, there are the instructional expenditures, which are basically expenditures related to the interaction between the teachers and the students. Most of the instructional expenditures would be teacher salaries and teacher benefits. Also, teacher supply, material and supplies, teacher equipment, anything that assists that teacher in providing instruction to those students. So any the supply, the copier, anything, whatever it takes to provide instruction to those teachers would be deemed instructional services, which most of that will be the salaries and benefits of the teachers. Instructional support services, activities providing supervision, really those are dollars that are used to support the teachers so that they may deliver instruction to the teachers, such as your principals. They support the teachers in providing instruction to the teachers. The assistant principals, they assist our teachers so that they may provide instruction to the students. Counselors, librarians, nurses, reading coaches, all of those are what we deem instructional support services, and most of that is the salary and benefits of of those particular staff. It also would include program folks, like we may have a math specialist or science specialist that's also going out to the schools to work with the teachers and to help work with the students. Those will be deemed also instructional support services. Operation and maintenance, of course, we talked a lot about buildings and grounds, so operation and maintenance are those expenditures related to keeping our buildings and grounds both safe, secure, and operational. Auxiliary activities of subsidiary capacity, basically those are expenditures related to two areas. You got the five funds, you got your general fund, you got your special revenue fund, you got your fiduciary fund, you got the other funds. But auxiliary services will be transportation expenditures in the general fund and the food service, child nutrition services in the special revenue fund. So again, auxiliary services will be transportation expenditures. We got, I think, how many bus drivers do you have?
About 180.
About 180 bus drivers, where we have to pay the salaries and benefits of those bus drivers, all the fuel, all of the repairs, the tires, everything related to operating those buses, keeping those buses running, and to make sure those students are in school. General administrative services, and that's what I may guess that would be central office, finance department, human resources, basically activities concerned with establishing policies. Capital outlay, that's basically the renovations, improvements, the building new schools, and so forth. Debt service, again, the payment of long-term debt. Other expenditures, activities or programs that are not normally considered day school. And that also includes pre-K, which is kind of interesting. I said this the other day, that in a lot of states, pre-K is part of the regular educational process. In the state of Alabama, pre-K is considered another expenditure because it's not considered in the state foundation funding. Pre-K is not considered in our state foundation funding, so they don't even count the pre-K students so that we can get more monies. Those funds are derived from a different fund source that we get, so that's always going to be dependent upon how the economy is doing, where they can continue to fund the pre-K program.
So, Mr. Watts, real quick, so are you saying that in addition to the funding source for pre-K, some of that would have to come out of local revenue?
It have to come out of local revenue and or our federal dollars. Yes, ma'am.
Now, some school systems don't take the pre-K.
Yeah.
They can't afford to make up the additional amount needed. So some not too far from here have decided they're not going to do that anymore.
But we also look at how important pre-K is. So, yes. Okay. Let's look at our expenditures. We see just in the area of instruction and instructional support, that's about $180 million or $181 million. Basically, what that shows is that the monies are going towards the support of the classroom, and that's where we want it to go. That's about 80% of the total funding that we receive. About 80% of it. Operations and maintenance, about $22,837,000 for the operations, the repairs and so forth of our schools. Auxiliary services, about $9.2 million. Again, in the general fund, the auxiliary services would be transportation expenditures, the salary and benefits of our bus drivers, the repairs of the buses, the tires, the fuel, and all of those things related to keeping those buses operational. General administrative expenditures about $6.6 million. Other expenditures about $3.4 million, which would include pre-K expenditures. Other fund uses about $2 million. We're required to do what is called pass-through to our child nutrition program. That means our general fund must pay for some of the benefits of our child nutrition program. That's what that other fund uses is. And then we have a breakdown, a pie chart of our total expenditures. We see 80% of the monies are going to the schools, or the support of the schools. I also want to point out just on the general administrative. General administrative, because we hear a lot of talk sometimes saying, oh, they spending all that money over at the central office. Oh, they spending all this money on administration. Our administrative expenses make up 3% of the total operating funds. 3%.
Mr. Watts,
Now, the state,
isn't it about 5% as a rule?
yes, the rule is, the state say that anytime you go with 5% on administrative expenditures, that's too much. You're spending too much. But again, we see ours is at 3%. So a lot of times when folks say that, we're spending all this money on the central office and that kind of thing, that is just not true. The monies are going to support our students. Operation and maintenance, we see 10%, and we see those other breakdowns of transportation at 4%. I want to do just a little recap of FY 2019, then I'll talk about our 2020 fund balance. We began FY 2019 with a $21.9 million. But let's keep in mind that $21.9 million beginning fund balance, about $10 million of that was one-time revenues, which was the sale of real estate. And we all know that the sale of real estate is one-time monies. I mean, you can only get those monies one time, you can only spend them one time. And so that helped make up that $21.9 million fund balance. We were projecting a deficit for 2019. And of course, 2019 ends September 30th of this year. We're projecting a deficit of about $10 million. So we're projecting to end fiscal year 2019 with about $11.9 million. Now the state requires all school districts to have what is called a 1-month reserve. That means that whatever your total expenditures are, you divide that by 12, that's the 1-month requirement that all school districts must have. For 2019, our 1-month requirement was about $19.2 million. So our requirement was about $19.2 million. So we see that we're projecting $11.9 million in the fund balance. So it was about about $7-point-something million short. Now the school district and the board, we knew that we were facing a deficit. There were certain things that we did to try to offset that deficit. One of the things that we did, and I see a couple of our administrators here, is we asked all of our administrators who had the budgets for their departments to let's reduce those budgets about 10%. For the most part, most of them did reduce their budget. Some didn't quite go to 10%. Some was very short, was very, may have gotten 1 or 2%. But for the most part, most of them did reduce their budget. So we're going to end fiscal year 2019 a little better than the $11.9 million at the end of FY 2019. But we see that the requirement was $19.2 million. Also, let's keep in mind that for 2020, we was losing almost 40 teaching units. I think it was 38-point-something teaching units that we were losing for FY 2020 because of our student population. That also was going to cost us about $2.7, $2.8 million. So we're looking at about $13 million that we really need to do something about. And that was the reason that the board and the administration made many of the adjustments that you may have heard about over the summer. We had to make those particular adjustments. Now, what do we project for FY 2020? We're projecting total revenues of $228 million, total expenditures of $225 million, so excess of revenues over expenditures at about $2.8 million. What that shows is that $10 million deficit, we pretty much did the things that we needed to do. The district was responsible to remove that $10 million deficit. It also shows that we're going to have an excess of revenues over expenditures of about $2.8 million. We're projecting to end fiscal year 2019, which will be our beginning fund balance, with about $16.9 million. So instead of us ending with $11.9 million, we're going to end with about $16.9 million. And that's a result of our kind of cutting some budgets and doing some other things to kind of decrease that $10 million deficit that we're projecting. So that's very responsible on the superintendent and the board's behalf. So therefore, when you add that $2.8 million, which is the excess of expenses over revenues, which is derived from subtracting those expenditures from the revenues, you get $2.8 million. Then we add that to what we project our beginning fund balance to be at the beginning of this year of $16.9 million. We are projected to end fiscal year 2020 with about $19.7 million. Now, our required fund balance for FY 2020 will be about $18.8 million. We see that required fund balance have increased also as a result of our decrease in our expenditures. Next, we'll talk about the special revenue fund. Most of those funds are derived from federal dollars. We see about $43.8 million in federal dollars, and I'll talk about those local sources in just a second. Special revenue fund, about $148,000 of the special revenue funds are state dollars. We have a little program called the JAG program that assists our students. I think for the most part, the JAG program is the students that are, Dr. Williams, are those students that are working or participating in some, Mr. Mitchell, the JAG program, are those students that are working a little bit?
It is, the job to work or whatever, yeah.
Okay.
And some special training.
Special training and those kind of programs for our students.
And the acronym is Job for Alabama Graduates.
Jobs for Alabama Graduates. So it's a great program for our students. I kind of wish we had a lot of some more local funds to kind of help out even on this particular program as well. But those are some excellent programs that we'd like to expand at some point. About $43.8 million we're projecting from the federal government. That's the Title I to Title II Child Nutrition Food Services dollars. Our local dollars, about $6 million in the special revenue fund. Now, most of those local dollars in special revenue are basically local school public dollars. And they are child nutrition food service dollars from rebates and from the sale of certain, is it salads or sale of certain things that we do have at the school. Now we know that all of our children is on a program called CEP. That means that they don't have to pay for the lunch. However, we do have like bars and those kind of things that kids can purchase out of the cafeteria. So that would be part of those local revenues there. And then we see a breakdown of our special revenue fund. We do see $43.8 million of it are federal dollars, as we stated earlier. $6 million, of course, are local revenues, and $2 million is other. And we just wanted to show just an analysis of what our federal dollars are this year, 2020, compared to 2019. And we see that's about $3.1 million. Other than the federal dollars, we see state revenues. As I stated, we talked about the about the $65,000 JAG grant. Also, local schools receive a little small appropriation sometimes from city councilors and legislators and so forth. And then we see the local dollars, the local school public funds make up the larger amount, and the CNP pass-through that we spoke about earlier. And there we see just a breakdown of all of our expenditures for special revenue. The amount that's going towards instruction, $17 million, instructional support, and all this about 26, almost $27 million going towards instruction. Again, that the $18.8 million in special revenue, all of that is food service expenditures. The paying for the food, the paying for all the cafeteria workers, anyone associated with providing services for the feeding of our children. And there we see just a pie chart of those expenditures. Again, we see the majority of it going towards instruction, and the other large amount is going towards food service. And here we have just a breakdown of the fund balance of our special revenue fund. Total revenues about $52 million. Excess of revenues over expenses about $1 million. That excess of revenues over expenses is mostly coming from our local schools. These are monies that are generated at the local school level. And of course, they'll begin the year, we're estimating at about $3.4 million. It will end the year with a little bit more than what they began the year with about $4.4 million. Debt service fund, again, debt service fund is used to pay long-term debt, and also we have long-term debt also in our capital projects fund. But those are dollars that was transferred from the capital projects fund to debt service to pay long-term debt on some of the bonds that we have. Again, this shows the debt service fund, of course, it ends in zero. Okay. Capital projects fund, again, those are dollars that are utilized to also repair, renovate, kind of fix up schools, along with the maintain of those schools. We see about $7.3 million, which includes the state capital purchase funds, about $1.7 million. As I stated earlier, we're required also to put up about $1.7 million in order to participate in the state's capital projects fund. So that's what that is. And there we see the expenditures related to that, to the capital projects fund. And as I stated, I did say that the revenues are transferred from there to the debt service. And then we just show the expenditures in the capital projects fund, both are going towards maintenance and paying the debt. And we're in the year, we're projecting about $1.5 million in that particular fund. Expenditure trust fund, which is our last fund. Again, those are the non-public school dollars. Again, expenditure trust fund are non-public school dollars. The SGA club or the science club, those are club monies that are generated or raised on behalf of a particular group of students. It's generated at that local school for those particular students. Now we can entertain some questions.
One of the things that surprised me, and the page is not numbered.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's a different one. This is. That I noticed is that with Alabama being with 47th, 49th of at the bottom, that there's not a lot of money put towards like critical resources in our classrooms. Textbooks, I was $75. That's, I mean.
That out. We receive $75 per student per textbook. We know you all have students that are in college and so forth. Well, books on the elementary level, high school level, those is pretty much the same. We all know that one textbook can cost over $100. We just get $175 per child per textbook. Another reason that we need to look at increasing those local revenues.
The other one I noticed was with us having the state having a lot of issues with reading proficiency and achievement in those areas as well as math, that there's very little money that goes towards library enhancement.
That's true. That's also
And
true.
$157
Right.
per unit.
Per unit, yes. And not only that, also look at the amount you get for technology.
Oh, technology, $350 per unit.
So that's why teachers have been having to come out of their pockets a lot to help pay for many of the things that school districts that have those resources are able to do.
Okay. You said, I think you told us that teachers were getting $600 this year, right?
That's correct.
Okay. The comment I want to make is on what Erica just brought up, is we get $75 per textbook. Last year we got $70.
That's
Okay,
correct.
so I remember this was a huge issue to me, and Dr. Moore tried to help me understand it. I don't know if anything's changed. I guess I'm asking if things changed, because even though it's 75, we took that all into one pot, multiplied that by the number of pupils that we had, and it was never getting past really the 3rd or 4th grade. It was the kindergartners getting it and started going up, and a lot of it was consumables. Those are the books that people write in and they we can't use again.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I was hoping that something was done about either putting a halt on some of the consumables, and I did hear from JD that they got some new history textbooks, okay, which I was really pleased at that, but I've never really understood how that works. When does it ever get to the junior high and high school? Why do we keep repeating?
Local money.
In systems where you have enough local revenue, they make up the difference from where the state money stops. So if it runs out around 3rd or 4th grade, then local money picks up and gets the rest of your textbooks for the remaining students. So if you don't have enough local money to go, then that's where you hear we haven't had any new textbooks in math in 6, 7, 8, 9 years.
My question is there not a cycle where if we gave it to kindergarten through 3 this year, now we would go to 4 through 6 the next year? Why do we keep repeating, starting at the kindergarten level?
So it doesn't work that way. It works by subject. So if a math book is adopted this year, you take your pot of money and you buy the math books K-12. Now, the math books may run out, the money may run out in the lower grades. And then you try to figure out how to get the books in math the rest of the way up. So that's one pot of money, $75 per child, different textbooks every year, but you still run out if you're going to get all of your new math books for,
I see.
you
So
see what
you're
I'm saying?
It would take you literally 4 years if you were looking at those 4 subjects.
And depending on how many students you have and all that, and then the price of the textbook, has a lot to do with it.
And then from time to time, you also have to purchase books for some of those exploratory courses too.
Yes.
I mean, you got foreign language courses and other courses too that we need to purchase textbooks for too. That may not be part of that adoption. So, again, local fund, that's where it picks up at.
And this is just a clarifying question, because I thought when you spoke, and I think you said it again today, $75, that's per child, not per textbook.
No.
So even though the kid might need 5 textbooks, we're talking about $175, not 5.
Thank you, Dr. Cody, that's correct.
Okay, I'm gonna be nosy. Where did, because I just wanna know, where did Burkett's money go? What fund did that go into? When
The
somebody,
$96,000.
yeah, where does that go?
Those are discretionary money. He also had with him a list of of the schools and the classes, the schools and the subject areas that he wanted to support.
Okay.
So those monies would go directly to
So he
those schools
basically
in those
earmarked
particular
his own.
activities. That's correct.
Okay, good.
In fact, they were sent out to those schools today.
Madam President, I had one other question, and this one is for Mr. Mitchell. As we've reviewed the budget, have we looked at some of the programs that we're using in our schools and looked at how well they're helping our children academically, and if we need to keep them or do away with them.
Yes, ma'am, we did a program review to consider all programs that we had. We also encouraged, we did not require, because the Title I money, they have to meet with a committee, so we can't require. But we encourage them to stay with the district-supported program. So we have 4. We have Renaissance, which you are familiar with, that we purchased last year. We can say purchased. We have SREB, which is not a product, it's a program, you know, in our district. We have the Renaissance, SREB, Alex Redbird, which hopefully will come on board if we have it with CSI money to support math instruction. But we did not have one for math in elementary grades. We'll make sure that we have a technical support situation for elementary, you know, so we can support it there. And so we're encouraging all schools to stay with those particular programs. And they are all evidence-based. Clearinghouse has a website that says, should you invest in this program or not? And we're letting that guide, should we or not.
Sure. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So, my question just sort of stems from some basic data that, the average income from Montgomery County, residents is $50,230. That's based on currently within the banking system in terms of how they hand out loans in the county and where your income is from. So that's our average income. The average rent on a 3-bedroom, so if someone has rental property, is about $1,000. HUD currently pays $895 a month on Section 8 for a 3-bedroom unit. And we know that school funds come from property taxes. And so my question is, a 24 millage rate on a $100,000 property would boil down to $20 a month. And I know you can waste $20 on getting your nails done. So I just wanna know, is it reasonable for us to begin to advocate and say, is the future of our city worth $20 a month to you? Is a homeowner who's collecting $895 in Section 8 rent, can he spare $20 a month? Is a homeowner who's renting market rent for $1,055 a month, can they spare $20 a month for education?
Your question is a great one. It's not part of the budget process at this point because this is an ad valorem tax increase is something that we would like to see. We are working toward. We have a committee right now working on what our needs are. Because to be honest with you, I don't know what our millage increase needs to be because I haven't looked at the whole picture of what we need.
Which was my next question. How far does the millage rate need to increase to bring our district budget to parity?
We don't know yet. And we are working on that. We hope to have a report in November of what the needs are. And we are working it. You're perfect, just a little early. We are. Are there any other questions from Mr. Watts about the actual budget? Yes.
Would the social workers come under the instructional support?
Yes,
services?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And then as far as the principals, like I'm just looking at this line, per school, the half a principal, or the schools that are sharing principal, vice principals or assistant principals?
The assistant principals also is based on student population. And it usually is around, you earn an assistant principal usually around 500 students. So every school is not going to have an assistant principal because we have less than 500 students in some schools. In fact, from a district standpoint, I think we earned only 24 and a half assistant principals district-wide. And as you know, we have about 50 schools. Therefore, those districts that do have assistant principals in all of their schools, they are paying for those with local funds.
Okay. More?
All right, I recommend, if you don't mind, so that we can get this into the state, I recommend that you approve the FY 2020 budget.
Madam President, inasmuch as Mr. Watts has explained, he has done a yeoman's job of explaining the what, when, where, and how. with that having been said, I'd like to move that we approve our budget.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, show with a raise of your hand. Thank you. Our next meeting is September the 24th, and with that, we are adjourned.